we also are starting to get a sense that something else is going on, especially after seeing the probe droid and then learning that both their parents are no longer alive.
You're listening to
Path of the Jedi
with your host, Ronnie Cruz.
All right, welcome to Path of the Jedi, the podcast where Star Wars meets personal development. My name is Ronnie Cruz, your host for this, remarkably eventful adventure. Right, obviously a lot has happened in the past week, and we've discussed a lot of it in the show. We did a live stream. Now, if you guys don't know, if you're not caught up yet, we did have a live stream last Friday, April 1st, and I recorded a special episode revolving around that live stream to discuss all the madness that happened at the Oscars. I think there were some very there was a lot of opportunity for learning moments, if not for the parties involved, for us as outside observers. So if you didn't get a chance to tune in and plug into that live stream, you can actually go to our Facebook page and watch the replay. And for future reference, that is where we will be doing future live streams. That's right. It went so well, and I had such a great time, and there was such good content and discussion around that I think, we're definitely going to do it again. So it's just a matter of scheduling that. Stay tuned. Today we are going to discuss the fourth installment in the Star Wars Visions series called The Village Bride. Now, this episode very much is in line with what we've seen so far with Star Wars Visions, in that it is so deeply rich and layered thematically, and there's so much that we could really talk about from episode to episode. So let's do what we always do and take this journey one step at a time. Our story takes place on a planet that on the onset seems very lush and raw and, untouched, undeveloped, unspoiled. And the inhabitants of this planet seem very much in communion with this, right? They as a people and culturally, seem very provincial. They live in a village where they still use torches at night. They still have bonfires and village festivals. Although they do have, a handful of droids helping them out. For the most part, it's a very simple, one with nature type of culture and lifestyle. And so, of course, their rituals and their traditions are going to reflect that. In the first part of the story, we see our bride and her groom-to-be hiking up a mountain to presumably perform some sort of prayer ritual. And you can kind of sense immediately that these traditions and these rituals are deeply rooted, right? Like, these are ancient practices. I mean, we see in this sequence that the groom is actually carrying his bride on his back in this chair contraption because, and I quote,
"Well, we can't have a bride with dirty feet. Where we're going is far too sacred for that."
And there's a lot more of this in this part of the episode. And in fact, as I've rewatched it, I'm noticing that there's a lot of very significant details that I completely missed in the initial viewing. For instance, they're along the trail, as they're hiking up the mountain, off to the side of the trail, there's a wrecked probe droid. Now, for those of you guys who don't know what probe droids are, they're nasty little buggers that were initially used by, I believe, the Separatists, and then they were used by the Empire as like little spy droids, right? But they're also packed kind of a mean bite. So there's this wrecked probe droid off to the side of the trail, and this triggers a memory in the bride, and she says, "I wish my parents could be here to see this." And the groom replies, "I have no doubt they'll be here to watch. They're one with the planet, just like my parents." So while this scene is painting this picture of this, again, very pastoral, very provincial, one with the planet, one with nature type of people, we also are starting to get a sense that something else is going on, especially after seeing the probe droid and then learning that both their parents are no longer alive. But for now, suffice it to say, they were able to get to the sacred spot on the mountain, complete the ritual, and make their way back down to the village. Now, as they're making their way back down, they observe what I thought was the sunset, but the girl comments that it's the sunrise. I don't know if that's a lost in translation sort of thing, but when she sees this, she says,
The sun's rising. It has been since a long time before we were born. And it will keep on setting too, I suppose, long after we're gone.
Whatever the case, whether the sun is rising or the sun is setting, this, I think, serves again as a reminder of these people's culture, right? That they are in communion and one with their place in the universe. You might think then that this is going to be the topic of our discussion today, right? The oneness with nature, the cycle of birth and death, the circle of life type of situation. And really, that's part of the conversation, but what I want to focus on today is the theme and topic of control. Now, in the story, we also have two other characters who are not from this planet. They're off-worlders, they're visiting, and it seems to be that they're there to kind of observe and learn about the culture of these people. Neither of these characters are actually named. We only know them as the explorer and his companion, the masked woman, who eventually we learn the masked woman is actually a Jedi. And the explorer actually had invited her to come check out this planet with him because the backstory is apparently her master had roots on and was from this planet. We see in a quick flashback that this masked woman survived what looked to be probably Order 66, and now she was in exile and is in hiding, concealing her identity, hence that's why she's the masked woman. The story moves on, and we find them now at the village attending a celebration, a party of some sort that I guess is to commemorate the bride and the groom-to-be. However, instead of the mood being, festive and joyful and celebratory, it's actually pretty somber. And this is when we find out everything else that's been going on the planet with this village, with these people. We find out that the war between the Separatists and the Republic did actually reach this planet, and that the Separatists had stripped this planet of its resources in order to fuel and supply their war efforts. And that's why we see the probe droid, the wrecked probe droid, in the forest. Now, after the war ended and the Separatists left, they thought they were all good. What ended up happening, however, is that a band of raiders, it's always raiders, right? With these small villages, these simple villages, it's always about the raiders. The raiders had taken all the droids and the weapons and the ships that the Separatists had left behind, and they were using, this technology to pretty much bully the village, continue to bully the village and take resources from the planet. And the icing on the cake is that they were going to take the village leader, who happened to be the bride's grandfather. They were going to take the village leader as collateral to prevent any kind of retaliation. Now, in an act of selflessness and self-sacrifice, the bride actually volunteered to be that collateral in place of her grandfather. And so we have this pretty dark, imposing cloud hanging over what's supposed to be a joyous celebration. Our bride, she's pretty zen about this whole situation. She seems pretty resigned to her fate because I think she has accepted the fact that this is the best way that she can keep the village safe. There are some, however, that disagree with her, right? Namely, her younger sister. People who feel like, they need to stand up to these band of raiders, because if they don't, they're just going to keep getting taken advantage of. This whole situation, for me, gives very much the Braveheart Prima Nocta vibes, right? And for those of you who haven't seen that movie, you need to go watch it. This young couple gets married, and as soon as they get married, the British, monarchy or the governor of that region comes and takes the bride away for Prima Nocta, as supposedly is his right under the law. And so the groom and the rest of the village now are stuck in this position. Do they decide to retaliate and risk getting massacred, basically, or do they just accept this as part of their fate? And here's where the conversation about control comes in. From the beginning, as I mentioned, our bride is very zen about everything, right? She's accepting of some very universal truths. The passage of time, the cycle of life, the inevitability of change. If you guys go back to episode 1, The Phantom Menace, Shmi Skywalker, Anakin's mother, even said this. She said, "You can't stop change any more than you can stop the suns from setting." And this is very much our bride's belief system, right? And it's a belief system that governs all her decision making. She trusts and has faith in what they call the Majina, which really is just these people's word for the Force. So it's very, very Jedi-like, right? It's all about bending to the will of the Force and accepting that there are just some things, some universal absolutes that are completely out of our control. But what about everything else? What about the will of other people? Well, obviously, we can't control what other people do. We can't control the will of other people. In this case, the bandits, the raiders, are imposing their will on the villagers with the threat of violence, of course. And so for the villagers, they can't control that. They can't control what these bandits decide to do. And so their choices are either stand up to them and risk violent conflict or surrender to their demands. And clearly, the villagers are outmatched here. Tactically, they have a very slim chance of a successful resistance. The bandits have the weapons, the bandits have the numbers, the bandits have the droid army. So the villagers are outgunned and outclassed in every category. And this is why our bride decides to comply with their demands. And that's it, right? That's what she can control. She can control the decisions that she makes and the actions that she takes. So in this situation, she's actually really taking responsibility for that. When I was watching it initially, I was thinking, man, why is she so resigned to accepting this as if it's her fate? When really she made the conscious decision, right? Because she knew that that's the only thing she could control. So she had to make the conscious decision that she thought was best for the entire village. And when I first watched this, and really same thing with the Braveheart, I had the same reaction. My reaction was, why is the bride just going along with this, right? Why is she resigned to accept this as if it was her fate? In truth, she makes a conscious decision. She decides after having weighed out her options that this is the best course of action. So in essence, she's really taking responsibility of herself and for the village as well, because that's what she can control. She can't control what anybody else does. She can only control her own decisions, her own actions. And what's really cool is, again, after having re-examined this, we see that she's also choosing to actively control how she sees the situation and therefore how she feels about it, right? This entire time, she has such this even keel. She seems completely unfazed by what's about to happen. Sure, it's not necessarily ideal for her, but she chooses and actually accepts this as her path for the safety and well-being of the village. Thankfully, there are other individuals in the story who also have a choice to make, namely the traveler and his friend, the Jedi. For our Jedi, she can't control what the raiders do, and she can't control what the villagers and the bride decide to do. And so the choice that she has to make is whether to intervene or not. Now, you got to remember, she's in hiding, right? This is a time when we can assume that the Jedi are being hunted down now that the Empire is in power. So does she reveal herself and risk being found out as a Jedi and eventually hunted down? Or does she stand by and just watch as the villagers get taken advantage of? Ultimately, she decides to reveal herself and intervene on behalf of the villagers. With the help of her friend, the traveler, they're able to defeat the bandits and free the villagers of this tyranny. And that was the decision that she makes. Despite the risk to herself of being hunted down by the Empire, she knew that she can't control what the Empire does or doesn't do anyways. What she can control is, again, the decisions that she makes and the actions that she takes. And so what she decides here is very simply to stop hiding who she really is and to help where help is needed. And that's what we're all faced with. In a world that's rapidly changing and everybody seems to be running around like chickens without heads, the only thing that we can control is ourselves. We can't control anyone else. We can control how we choose to respond to things. We can control the decisions and the actions that we take. We can control how we see things. The only real thing that we have control over is ourselves. And to think otherwise is folly. I'd hate to go back to the Oscar incident because we've already talked about it and it's actually been talked to death, but it serves as a great example. Will Smith can't control what Chris Rock does or says from stage. What he can control is his own choices, his own decision, his own actions. And we see where that went, right? Same thing for Chris Rock. He can't control what Will Smith or anybody does in the audience. But what he can control is how he reacts, how he responds, the decisions that he makes. And as we've seen, I think, in the days following the incident, he's been pretty mature about the whole situation. So that's it. That's what this episode is telling me, that there are things that happen to us, that will happen to us, that are beyond our control. And the only thing that we can control is how we respond to those things, what we do with the choices that we have. Sure, the sun rises and the sun sets. It has been since before us and will continue to do so long after we're gone. What matters is what we do with the time we are given, because that is the only thing we can control. All right, well, that's going to do it for today's episode. What do you guys think, right? What do you guys think? Some pretty heavy stuff for a bunch of cartoons, right? Star Wars Visions. They are some next level stuff. So I want to know what you guys think about The Village Bride and about today's discussion on control, or if there's any other themes from The Village Bride that you guys picked up on. Send me your thoughts. Let's have a conversation. You can hit me up on Twitter or Facebook. It's at POTJ Podcast. And of course, you can send an email or even an MP3. I would love to play that on the show to info@pathofthejedi.com with the title of this episode in the subject heading.
Cover me, Porkins.
All right, so lots happening right now. First, I want to again thank everybody who tuned into our live stream on the 1st. That was a tremendous amount of fun. It was just great. It was just great times, especially for those of you who hung out on the Zoom afterwards for the after party discussion. A very, very educational experience for me as well, given that this is something that I want to continue doing periodically with the show. So again, thank you so much. If you missed that particular live stream, you can go watch the episode or watch the live stream on our Facebook page, facebook.com/POTJ podcast, or you can listen to the highlights published here on the show in the last episode. So it's up and it's ready for your listening pleasure. It was just again a tremendous amount of fun. So thank you all for participating in that.
Classified, really.
Now, outside of Star Wars themed personal development discussions, if you're looking for more discussions, if you're looking for a community, more personal development to plug into, I want to remind you guys that we do have the Path of Growth community on Facebook. It's facebook.com/groups/path of growth, and we have a weekly Zoom call every Sunday evening where we talk about just our insights, things that we're going through, what's happening in the world. We have a book discussion right now. We're reading the book called The Wisdom of Compassion, and so it's a great community to be a part of if you need and are looking for something to plug into, something to fill your cup in that regard, and to share and to hear other perspectives. So it's a great community. Again, it's facebook.com/groups/path of growth. For those who are looking to level up in their health, we have another group called the RUN Runclub. All right, it's a lot of R's. But I put this thing together and with the intention of helping you improve your health through tips on nutrition, tips on running and fitness, right? So, again, if you're in a place in life where you're wanting to improve your health, level up in your fitness, level up in your nutrition, and just overall feel better, you can go to facebook.com/groups/run Ronnie Run. All right, now it's time for my favorite part of the show, the shout out. This week's shout out goes out to my friend Scott Allen Russell. That's right, Scott Russell of Pastime Comics and Games here in Asheville, North Carolina. I wanted to give Scott a shout out because, well, I just recently picked up my comics. It's been like 2 months. And so he's super patient with me, right? Super accommodating. He makes sure that I get all the issues that I'm looking for, and he'll hold on to them until I actually come down into town. I rarely go into town, guys. So I definitely want to thank him for that. On top of that, he's just a great guy, right? He's like one of the coolest guys I've ever met. I can come into the store and, of course, I'll have my comics and we can just sit and chat and completely geek out. And you guys don't understand, like, there are very few people. Well, okay, so maybe you Star Wars folk out there, my Star Wars listeners, but for everybody else, like, there are a few people that I can fully geek out with, and Scott's one of them, right? So it's always a pleasure to come into the store, visit, grab my comics, and have just a fun conversation. It never fails. He always puts a smile on my face. We always end up laughing about something, whatever it might be, and just talking shop, right? So it's just, I wanted to take the time this week for this week's shout out to recognize Scott Allen Russell for doing what you do, man. I appreciate everything that you do for me, especially with the comics and the conversation. So with that, Scott, this shout out goes to you. All right, well, that's going to do it, guys. I've got a busy next couple of weeks ahead. I'm actually going to be in Hershey, Pennsylvania this weekend. So if you're in Hershey or around the area, you want to meet up, let me know. I'm going to be at Hershey Park on Sunday. So just hit us up on our social. You know how to reach me. Beyond that, we're going to have a fresh episode for you next week where we'll talk about the next episode in Star Wars Visions, the Ninth Jedi. So until then, everybody, please be well, be safe, and may the Force be with you.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company nor Lucasfilm Limited and is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names and sounds and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is intellectual property of Path of the Jedi unless otherwise indicated.